Hello and welcome to my space here. I am Stephanie Roberts, and I will be talking to you about this book. Um, in short, I'll be giving you a book review or summary, should I say, on the book When Breath Becomes Air by the author Paul Kalanithi, uh, who is a second generation, should I say, second generation Indian, a neurosurgeon and writer, author. Um, and this is a book about his journey uh, and his experiences uh, in he talks about his life in general, but through the experiences he had encountered during his residency as a neurosurgeon. And let's get into the reviewing of the book. So for me, this book was very important to me because I resonated so much to it because I am also in the medical field. I am a final year doctor of dental medicine intern, should I say, student intern. So I am in doing my clinical practicals, and that is where I am at, which is closer to me finishing the program. But it has not been the smoothest of roads. It has involved a lot of challenges and you know try learning patience and um, pushing yourself really hard to discover this uh, discover how much you can give to it. And dentistry is a field of its own, and neurosurgery is a field of its own that is very complex, and it requires a lot from someone. And Paul Kalanithi was somebody you could say had a journey of his own. He started off as um, in the art side of things. He was writing, he was doing English research and in that type of field before he in his pursuit of trying to understand completely the meaning of life. So he was really into research, and later on, he went for neurosurgery. So um, that gave him a very closer view of how fragile life is by being somebody who operates on the brain of the human being. So some of the let's begin with some of the highlights that really resonated with me in this book, and we can just discuss some of them. So he begins off with a very catchy quote uh, from the Religio Medici. So it says, "With what strife and pains we come into the world we know not, but 'tis commonly no easy matter to get out of it." That's one thing, that we do come into this world that we have no idea of, and we still come into it with a lot of struggles along the way to find our place in it, and yet it's never an easy matter that we end up leaving it. Everybody leaves it with a lot of going through a lot of things and struggling through a lot of things. This book has great vocabulary, should I say, on account of his writer skills because he began off uh, in that particular sphere of study, and he's got very good vocabulary, so you will learn a lot of terms, whether that is of English or medical vocabulary. So if you're a medical student or someone in the medical sphere, this is a great tool for you to learn some of those medical terms and review them out because he uses a lot of those. So there's a second phrase that caught me in this uh, book was when he said, maybe life is merely an instant too brief to consider, the idealism too brief to consider. Uh, that is very true because uh, when you look at his experiences and his uh, practice, he saw how people live life, and then a condition could, just stop all of that and it's done. And so he expressed it saying maybe life is merely an instant. What is an instant? Something that is quick. And he says, too brief to consider. To consider is to, meditate upon, to understand, to. It's too quick for most people to even understand what it's really about. And he talked about how, you know, he gives a preview of the medical uh, field and how taxing it can be, and so he looks at this perspective of life for the patient's side and also from the doctor's side, because both are experiencing things but on different side. And it's easy as a doctor to really, you might lose sight because you're experiencing all this. It's never like a smooth sailing field where it's roses, but you get to see the painful side of life. You get to run around all day attending to this and that and never really having time for yourself. And that's the same type of experience I got in dentistry. It's more giving of your time, your energy every single day. And he says, as time goes by, the idealism of most of the people he was, going into this field with, their med school applications, lost. The med school application essays were lost. The idealism of that med school application, when they ask you, why do you want to study, let's say, dentistry, and everybody's saying, I want to help people, I want to save lives, I want to put a smile on people's faces, and all kinds of things, and heroic motives. And why do you want to study medicine? Why do you want to be a nurse? I want to save lives, I love helping people, and I just love the science, and all those great motives, which are really the essence of it. And it's very vital for you to go into it with that, because that is the main thing that will actually keep you if you remember it. So he calls us in this point to, the only way you can keep pushing through is mostly if you keep in mind and remember why you started, because when you lose sight of that, it is easy to just give up under the pressure of the practice. So Yes, he goes on to say putting lifestyle first is how you find a job and not a calling. So, what's the difference between a job and a calling? A job, I think, is just something you do so that you can survive life. So, you find something that can just earn you a living, and you're not doing it because you're necessarily passionate about it. But when it's a calling, this is something you are born to do. This is something that you're destined to do, and you do it with such passion and you give it your all, should you say. So it is something genuine. So that is how this man, what kind of neurosurgeon he was. He was somebody who gave his all to save lives, to do those surgeries right, to attend to those patients and talk to them. If you're just doing it because it's a job, it's it loses its essence, and you may not be um, as much of an effective doctor in handling the well-being of your patients, because that's very important. And he goes on to say humans are organisms subject to physical laws, including, alas, the one that says entropy always increases. Diseases are molecules misbehaving. The basic requirement of life is metabolism, and death its cessation. This brings us down to, as humans in this life, being an organism. That is very scientific and true. And as organisms, live because of we live because of metabolism. That is the process that allows us to keep on operating and allowing our body to give us life. But because uh, we are subject to physical laws and, you know, uh, entropy, like hardship and complications uh, seem to increase with time as we go. The forces of this life, they get to us and they increase with time. And eventually, you know, the molecules in us, sometimes they misbehave because maybe of the entropy that occurs with us, and that's where disease comes in. And disease can affect our metabolism, and when metabolism stops, the cessation of it is when death arrives. So are we just subject? We are subject, all of us, then, to death because we are organisms in a world where entropy increases. So he goes on to say, at some of those critical junctures, when you're, the critical junctures he was talking about was when you're dealing with a patient who has to choose whether to survive with a life supporting machine or to choose death. And he says, at these critical junctures, the question is not simply whether to live or die, but what kind of life is worth living. That's a deep question. What kind of life is worth living? And as a medical practitioner, you have to explain these things to a family that wants their loved ones to survive, to a person who wants to, live, but to think of the dignity of a person, and really what kind of life is worth living. This is somebody who as a human, and they have things that they value and love, and they have an identity of who they have been all this time, and to be reduced to living by the support of a machine, of being fed through tubes and not being able to talk, or not being able to move and do anything, and using other people as, is that a life that you would want to go on for the rest of it, or avoid all that, maintain your identity and dignity, and die at least with dignity, and to go on living a life that isn't worth it. And this doesn't only apply to a medical situation in a hospital bed, this can be in real life. We have to sometimes make choices, whether it is in any area of our lives. What kind of life is worth living? If you look at yourself where you are right now, is the life that you are living worth living? Or is there, can you put an end to that cycle and do something else that is more of who you are? A place that where you feel cold, inspired, a place where you feel you have dignity and all those things. So that really struck a chord for me. Uh, so yes, what is it in life that makes it meaningful enough to go on living? You know, what are those things? Let's, like, for somebody who is going to be subject to life support, everything that has meaning is lost. All those things that kept you going, you know, laughing with friends and family, looking at beautiful things. Some people lose sight, they can't see. Some people can't. If you love to sing, you cannot do that. That was maybe your motivation in life. You lose all of that. If you were a painter, you don't have that dexterity anymore. If you were a writer, if you were a surgeon, if you were an athlete, all that is taken away from you. And it really is a call to appreciate the things that we actually have in our lives, the meaningful things, and to really evaluate what are those things that are really meaningful in our lives that make it worth living. And when we discover what those things are, we need to latch on to those things to give us the zest for life once more. And you know, a lot of things were catchy to me, like, you know, what is the difference between, you know, neurosurgery and neurology? That's how much it gets into explaining for, well, into those things. So if you're somebody who's really interested in knowing medical terms, you want to know more about the medical field, or you are in it already and you just want something that is medically stimulating to the mind, this is a book that, you know, is going to keep you really learning and inspired in that direction. So, you know, when he experienced, you know, patients, you know, dying because of maybe just lack of inspiration from a doctor, or not taking anything seriously, or just seeing a patient that you wanted to live, seeing them die because maybe he didn't do enough, or it invoked in him, this is a quote that, you know, really spoke. He said, from that year, I resolved to treat my paperwork as patients and not vice versa, because there's a tendency, even like in dentistry, I'll talk about dentistry because that is what I'm studying. So in dentistry, there's such a tendency to treat patients as a requirement. I just need to get this done. I need this requirement done. so that I can move on to the next one, so that I can graduate. So I'm just gonna do this very quick just to get the grade that I need enough to pass. And you just, you start working on, these are people, these are lives. And if you are careless, you could waste this person's, it could be their time, their money, their life. You could injure them, you can make things worse. That is why that people write those requirements, see them as people. Those are patients that you need to really care for. So if you put care into your work, it becomes more effective in the treatment of a patient. So at the same time, he says, you're learning to judge whose lives could be saved, whose couldn't be, and whose shouldn't be requires an unattainable prognostic ability. This is where critical thinking comes into play, learning critical thinking, decision-making skills, and being a very solid, strong person. That is all required. It makes you that type of person if you are in the medical field. Prognostic ability. It can be used in other areas of life too. The situations. What is it in your life that you know it could be saved? What cannot be saved, and what shouldn't be saved? Making decisions is important than being unable to make any decision. There is far worse results in being indecisive. At the end of the day, you have to make a decision, not just in the medical field, any other part of life. So that was a point for me. And he goes on to say, drowning, even in blood, one adapts, learns to float, to swim, even to enjoy life, bonding with the nurses, doctors, and others who are clinging to the same raft, caught in the same tide. Isn't that just life? All of us are drowning in some way in this a rat race. They call it a rat race, right? Because we are all in the system, stuck in a system, and the system of life, just going at it. And you find that even in the system, people learn to just either adapt, find ways to be happy, find ways to, have even fun in the system like that. And I guess that's where you need to be at the end of the day. I don't know, because life is just crazy. It's hard everywhere, whether you're in this field or that field, it's hard. And so like in the medical field, they learn to adapt to all the crazy things that they see. Even while drowning, even in blood, he says, you learn to float, to keep swimming, to enjoy even life in those moments, bonding with other people, the nurses, the other doctors, who are clinging to the same raft in the same tide. And isn't that just a summary of our lives? Yes, more terms, more medical terms, just learning a lot of things, medications, about neurosurgery, and all those things. And then this term, this phrase, he said, nobody has it coming. Nobody has it coming. It's, nobody has it coming. Death is what he was probably talking about. Or anything that, shifts your life, shakes you. You know the term I was shook, because you didn't see it coming. You wouldn't be shook if you saw it coming. At the end of the day, all of us, if there's a reason, and I think we all can't see the future. We all don't know what is coming, so nobody really has coming. I've seen that. I've looked at life, seeing yesterday you were here with someone, and tomorrow just like that, they're gone. All their hopes, dreams, aspirations, that's it. They're gone, and nobody like it. That's why death is such a surprise most of the times, because nobody knows. It could be anybody. Nobody has it coming. So that's something that hits you from this book, something to think about. So he goes on to say, when there is no place for the scalpel, words are the surgeon's only tool. That part, you need to, it's not just like that's one thing. People just think, okay, whatever it is that you're doing, they think it's just about doing that job. I just need to be good at my dexterity. I just need to know my prescription, giving the right dosages, and then I'll be good as a doctor. But no, there are times when you need to give hope for a patient to go on doing that treatment, when you have to convince them why they need to do something. And your words will determine a lot, even in the patient's recovery or acceptance of something, a condition. This is where, you have to be very empathetic. You have to, empathy is a very big thing. It makes you be able to touch somebody's inner core, and that is a skill you learn in the medical field, and that you might even want to use in all your other areas of life. Being empathetic. So he goes on to say, an easy death, or to be strung between bags of fluids, going in, others coming out, to persist despite being unable to struggle. That is something, you see people going through these things, and that's where you ask, sometimes whatever it is, it could be a relationship. Let's just talk about that, something else that everybody relates to, is like a relationship. Sometimes we want to do the struggle love. It's like the description here, to be strung between bags of fluids, going in, others coming out, to persist despite being unable to struggle, or to choose the easy way out. Like, don't go through all those things. Just an easy death is better. That is something. So it goes on to say, easy human connections, trust instilled in patients, seeing the patients as a person instead of a problem to be solved. Again, more tips on becoming a great patient, medical practitioner. You have to easily connect with the patient, earn their trust, that they should know that my doctor he actually take care about my well-being, and learn to see those patients as people, and not just a problem to be solved. we find people who have suffered because they're afraid to go to the hospital because maybe the nurses are rude. Nurses maybe don't want to, give them the right attention. The doctor doesn't seem to, inspire trust. And so others are like afraid of going to the dentist because, and then you get surprised when a child maybe who was afraid of that and suddenly is more they're compliant to this other dentist and they're able to go there and even excited maybe to go for their dental visit because the approach of their dentist, their doctor, their nurse is one that instills their trust in them to know this doctor actually cares, this doctor wants me to be better and wants to take care of me, so I will go. And somebody can know about their condition and not miss out on it or get treated for their condition rather than shun it because they're afraid to go or were traumatized maybe by a treatment they received from a nurse or a doctor that didn't seem to care or was harsh towards them. So things to consider. I learned a lot in this book, like many terms. It's like just you need to read this book. So yeah, like I'll bring up my one of my favorite, the Kaplan Mayor curve. I don't know if that's how you really pronounce it. I should really check on that, but that's a curve that shows the statistics of survival chances of patients with regards to certain diseases. And let's say you have been diagnosed with a particular disease. Some people already judge like, okay, I'm not going to survive because according to this curve, the Kaplan Meier curve, my condition only has, that survival chance, which is maybe really low, and you lose hope and you give up and you die. So that's why I think, hope is such a powerful thing. I think it's intertwines with having faith. If you have hope, you're likely to have a life maybe that is more alive, should I say. Like it gives life to you. So you can easily maybe dream, you can do things, you can have zest, you can have zeal to keep on fighting when you have hope. So even if like your condition is bad or has bad statistics, usually the doctor is not gonna tell you to look at it when you're undergoing treatment if that's a good doctor. So let's tackle this and you don't look at that, and that's something I was learning in this book. Yes, and he described a patient saying one who endures hardship without complaint. Aren't we all patients in this life? We are all going through hardships. And if we're to be good patients, we should stop complaining. That's what a patient is. You endure, when you don't complain, I think it's easier to get through it. It's easier to get through it. And yes, he brings about the concept of the rabbit, or you call it the hare, and the tortoise. It it's like the journey of doing anything, of completion of a task, should you say. Some people want to go at it fast, and others go at it slower, and who gets the finish line first. In his case, when you're doing surgery on the brain or the spine, you have to be very careful, because if you make a mistake, it will lead you to ending up, finding ways to prevent, the mistake and trying to fix that, and that would take the procedure longer than if you simply were careful, a bit slower to execute maybe that cut, or to look carefully where you're going to place this instrument, and things like that will prevent you from wasting time trying to fix the error, and you end up getting there faster than if you went trying to be too fast. That can be the same thing with a race, with life. If you're gonna be fast, precise, careful, look where you're going. And sometimes slow is the reason they say slow and steady wins the race. So sometimes it's okay not to be too fast. That's what I just got from there. And yeah, he goes on to say, even if you are perfect, the world isn't. Like, we know it. We always ask this question, why do bad things happen to good people? It's because the world isn't the perfect place. So that's just the answer to it. Why do bad things happen to good people? The world is not perfect. And yeah, this is, I think, where maybe I'll open into the perspective of what happens to the author. He ended up getting cancer after being such a great doctor that he was, doing his best, being the great neurosurgeon that he was, skilled, dedicated, treating his patients not simply as paperwork, but as people, and being really involved. And he ended up being diagnosed with a lung cancer. Lung cancer is very deadly, should we say. And that's where it is. Even if you are perfect, the world isn't. I can relate to that. I know other people can relate to that. We've all experienced things that we felt like we didn't deserve things like that to happen to us, and they still happened. And that's c'est la vie. That's just life, right? And we learn these things in this book. And then he goes on to say, you can't ever reach perfection, but you can believe in an asymptote toward which you are ceaselessly striving. Let go of the idea of perfection. That will always stop you from either beginning anything or going for, let's say, a dream, or a skill, a talent, a relationship, a job opportunity, anything in this life, because you feel you're not as perfect. You need to let go of that. Believe in a simple something, a standard to which all of us are ceaselessly striving. You can never be the perfect one, but you can keep trying, and that makes a difference. Somebody who tries and somebody who doesn't, guess who is likely to achieve the goal? Somebody who tries. So, despite all the craziness in this life, just try. And then he goes on to say, we're sheep, lost and confused, and need a shepherd. That is true. I always used to wonder about that song, the Bible verse that said, all we like sheep are lost, but Jesus is the one who finds us and takes us home. And that's just on the Christian perspective, but I think this, can be applied. I think the shepherd is very symbolic. We all need, at the end of the day, to look up to something that is higher than us to guide us in the right direction, because on our own, we're a lost sheep. So he goes on to say, I think he was describing maybe one of the doctors, and he said, her hair long and dark, but as with those who spend time with death, strict with gray. That I had to take down, because I look at most doctors, ever since I was a kid, I was like, why do most doctors look old? Why are doctors all old? Why do they all have gray hair? And then when I got into dentistry, and I think that was my 5th year, and I was sitting down, and one of my friends tagged one of my hair follicles and pulled it out, and I was like, ouch, why did you do that? And she's like, this is what dentistry is doing to you, you're getting white hair. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I've seen that, but don't pull it out because more is gonna grow. That's a myth, I guess, but that's what it does to you. So I had to record that. But they say that's also a sign of wisdom. So I guess, the longer you, like, I think, yeah, you could see that doctors, they see things, they know things, they've gone through many experiences, and I guess that's the crown of wisdom they wear for it. He goes on to say, have a plan A, B, and C at all times. That I took into consideration, because you can never be certain of anything in life, right? That is why just be an open-minded person. Be open to other things. Even as you're following one course, learn to look around, to smell the flowers, see what is around you, because if things fail every now and again, but what keeps you going is if you look at, like, your plan B can get you through, your plan C can get you through. So be open-minded always, and that is the thing that has kept me going. I'm so open-minded. I love discovering things. I am a student of the world, if there is such a thing. I want to learn, and there's so many things. I love the idea of being multi-talented, because I feel like it opens you up to so many possibilities in this life, and it's something hopeful. So he goes on to say, the fact of death is unsettling, yet there is no other way to live. That the idea of death can be very depressing. If we think about it, it could stop you even from wanting to do anything or achieve anything if you just either experience it through the loss of a loved one. I've seen people give up on life because they lost somebody dear to them. It could be a mother, a father, a brother or sister, a friend, somebody they admired, even a celebrity. People lose hope, they give up. They'd say, what's the point of going on? This person really got me through. They gave me hope. They were the reason for me to live. But they die. We could die ourselves. And the thought of that could be very unsettling, like the author describes, because he was experiencing this condition of cancer, that after all his achievements and how far he had come, and the hopes that he had in his life to go on as a neurosurgeon and as a practitioner, and to have to face the idea of death, one would stop everything and give up. But this is something that everybody has to face with at the end of the day. I think it's Jay-Z, the rapper, who says, I'm not afraid of death, I'm not scared of dying because we're all going to do that. Every one of us, good, bad, or whatever it is, whatever classification of life you place anyone or you are placed in, at the end of the day, the destination is the same, right? So you might as well keep on going, doing those things, because there is no other way to live. So he goes on to say the point of life wasn't to avoid suffering. It's not. I think a lot of people are afraid of doing anything because they're scared of a consequence or something happening to them. But that's not the point of it. That's not the point of life. Don't think about the negatives. Just go with the positives. It helps you more. So he goes on to say the easiest death wasn't always the best. Wow, that part. It's like, okay, what? It's deep. It's very deep. It could be like, but you just said sometimes what kind of life is worth living, so isn't it better to choose death? But what kind of death, right? Is it an easy way out? Or sometimes you gotta sit through it and go through it and all that. So, something to think about. What goes on to say, we would carry on living instead of dying. You are not dead until you're pronounced dead, right? It's not over until God says it's over. It's not over until the fat lady sings. I don't know really what that really means, but I guess maybe like she sings the closing song or something. I don't know, but it's not over until it's over, okay? So don't give up on anything just because you're in a tough place right now and it seems dark. The darkest hour sometimes is usually it is just before the dawn. So yes, he was, and this is somebody who was dealing with lung cancer. Who knows how long he had to live? A very short time. And he said, would go on living. I would carry on living instead of dying. Take that with you as a mantra in every situation of your life. Carry on living. And he wrote, I needed words to go forward. I resonated to that 100%. I'm a word lover. I love words, whether it is, let's just say poetry. I love poetry. Poetry is in music. I love music, that's words. I love reading books. I love listening to podcasts. Language, words. There is power in the tongue. There is the power of life and death in the tongue. The power of the word. In the beginning was the word, and God spoke, and it was. There is life in our words. That is why we need to be careful what we choose to listen to, what we choose to speak, because those things have power. So speak life, listen to life, and you will have life. So he wrote, I needed words to go forward. I needed words to go forward. I don't know about you. And he says, I can't go on. I'll go on. That's a catching phrase that caught me. How many times this is the power of endurance. Endurance can get you through a lot of things. Whatever it is you're going through today, you always reach a point where you just like, that's it. I mean, I could die in this. That's the deepest one, when you feel like, okay, I'm facing death right now, or this is just too much. I'm crumbling under the weight. I just can't. but then you say, I'll go on. You know, my heart will go on, the famous Titanic song. That is one powerful song. That's like whatever tragedy or hardship that we can all face, and when we feel like we just can't, telling ourselves that we will go on can push us through every single time. Like, just tell yourself, I can't, but I will go on. So he goes on to say, even if I'm dying, until I actually die, I am still living. I think that's the one where he said we'll carry on living instead of dying. So, it's not over until. So even if you know you're gonna die, even if you know there's a bad situation you're in, like, until I actually die, I am still living. So until God gives the final say, let not anybody tell you that it's over for you. Whatever it is, it's not over for you. So he wrote, is neurosurgery, I'll ask this even for other fields, is dentistry, I'm a dentist, is neurosurgery dentistry or nursing or a law? Is it a calling? And he says, yes, because if it was just a job, it would be the worst job in the world. Haven't you ever realized that the prestigious things, acts of great service, jobs of, I'm a neurosurgeon, I'm a pilot, I'm a lawyer, the things that look like it's so wow, glamorous, and makes people even look like, heroes. I'm a firefighter. They're actually, if it was just a job, you wouldn't want to do that. Would you want to jump into a fire? Would you want to risk your life every single day flying up in the sky knowing if you made a certain error you're gone? Would you want to run around all day on your feet as a nurse? Would you wanna have to make life decisions for people every single day? The amount of pressure that goes on with that, memorizing so many acts and dealing with people's problems all the time as a lawyer or a judge, if that's why you have to do things that you're called for. When you have a calling, it's easier to do things than when it is just a job. When you do anything just for the job, you will lose sight and passion, and that's what I've come to realize. That is why I encourage anyone who is planning to pick a career, do something you're passionate about, that you're called for, not just because you want to get a good paycheck, because you will lose inspiration easily, because these things are not easy to do unless you are inspired. So it goes on to say human knowledge is never contained in one person. That is something to think about. I'm still reflecting on that. It's deep, so I'll just leave you with that one, and for myself to really delve more into it. Another part that caught me was when he said, life was lived in the first 20 years, and the remainder of it is just reflection. This is by Graham Greene. Well, if that's the case, then I think most of us who lived past 20, or even before, if you didn't finish your 20s, but those early years are what life is really made up of. So I think we're all shaped by our early years. That's why those years are very important in character shaping because that is what life is. And everything that follows after, I think, is just it's a reflection. It's looking back. It's either wanting to uh, experience what we experienced as a child and recreate it as an adult, or looking back at it. If you ask anybody, they'll tell you their best years were their childhood years because that was what was shaping them. That was where their happiness existed, and that's why they say never let the inner child in you die, because that's where life is. That's who you are. Um, and that's hopeful because I think if you're based on me, but I don't know about you, and that's why you need to really live a life now because tomorrow is just a reflection. So take the moment in and live this moment. If I look back on my early 20s, I lived it, and I wouldn't um, regret a lot of things because I was grateful for a lot of things, and yes, I lived it with passion. Um, this is the part where I think I even, this became one of my favorite books because in his struggle, at the end of it, he was writing this book while experiencing, cancer treatments, chemotherapy, reacting to chemotherapy treatment, throwing up, losing weight, missing his graduation because he got so sick, having to have his child, um, in a certain way because, if you don't do it early enough, you might not be able to have a child because of the radiations from all the cancer treatments that might prevent you from having a child, having to store up, using the sperm bank and all those kinds of things and lab things, and they will be able to have a beautiful child, but just having to know that this child will grow up without me because I might not be here for long, and eventually he got to discover it was a very short time. He had hoped. He had carried on fighting to be a neurosurgeon, practicing, going back to work through all the pain. And he fought, he continued living. And he started writing. He thought of something that he could still do, something that was worth, living for. And he found writing is what he should do. And he kept writing in that period. He was writing to finish the book we are now discussing, When Breath Becomes Air. And he says he found poetry more comforting than scripture. I know that scripture is poetry, God's poetry to us. Poetry is all around us, creation and everything. But there is something when you take poetry itself that was just written, even poetry of our time, old poetry, there is something to people who didn't understand what poetry was for. It is comforting, it is deep, it touches you in a very deep way, and it's a gift, and it is a powerful one. And a lot of people would say poets are sad people. Poetry is for sad people. Why is it so? Because it's hopeful, it is inspired, it touches you when nothing else can. It's real, it's deep, and I resonate with that so much. It's one of the reasons that I love poet. I call myself a poet because I love it, and I write poetry. I want to speak it. I want to reach out to people in poetry, and I learn from poetry, and it's beautiful. And to read about this neurosurgeon, a medical practitioner like myself, who went through something even harder than what I have experienced. I thought I went through crazy things in my journey, but he went through something deeper. He faced death in the eye, and he said poetry. And as you read the book, opening chapters have some poetry written in it, and you get the glimpse of it and how he looks at life. It's a form of philosophy too, I think. Well, I just love that part so much. One of the reasons why I love this book so much too, and why I had to even make a review about it. And I think you need to read it for yourself to really know how, it all went to, and how this book was actually even completed. I want you to read it for yourself. Some of you might shed tears. It touched me too much. It was a symbolic book for me, and I will never forget this read. When breath becomes air, and Paul Kalinithi's life, his journey, it was not in vain. It was for a reason, and this book is a testimony to it. And I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that this review could inspire you to read it for yourself. And I hope that you learned something from this. I'm Stephanie Roberts, and this was my review of When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Thank you.